without further ado, let me just kickstart. And of course, today's session, right, we'll be going through Rubrik for data resilience and security. I'm not sure how many of you have attended a Rubrik Forward event. It's actually our largest event of the year, right, where we announce the latest and greatest. And I'll be covering a little bit of those announcements as well, right, going through our data security solutioning, right, for our customers. So without further ado, let's take a look at the current landscape, right? Again, every one of us will be starting with a data imperative, right? So that's what has been driving our conversation across the enterprise sector. And of course, driving our growth in the business over the past few years, right? So if you look at quite a few key data imperatives that we're looking at, as the previous speaker has mentioned about zettabytes of a growth, right? And we are looking at 175 expected a worldwide volume data growth by 2025, right? So that's a tremendous amount of data. And of course, not to mention, a pandemic has really it's been driving the growth of the unstructured data with the accelerating the digital transformation over the past 2 years. Not sure if that's a good thing, but it has been helping with the digital transformation. And of course, come with that, it's important for us to think about how we can further secure and manage the data lifecycle, right? As the data grows, how are we going to manage the data from on-prem and into the cloud? As we are looking at a 49% growth, or rather in terms of cloud adoption, right? By 2025, nearly half the world's data will be stored in a public cloud, right? So we from time to time, we engage in a conversation how we can help organizations to leverage on cloud for long-term data protection, for long-term data retention. And from there onwards, how we can then help customers to be able to convert their data and instantiate their virtual machines in the cloud for cloud migration and so on, right? So that's been something that's driving our conversation in the enterprise sector as well, right? And of course, we are looking at the current landscape, right? Something that is quite disturbing, which is cybersecurity in the cyberspace. There's a lot of attacks going on. Predominantly this ransomware, and we have seen a huge growth in the numbers of attacks, right, in 2021, right? So 75% by 2025, at least 75% of IT organizations will face one or more attack. And every 11 seconds, right? So that's the statistics that we have gathered in 2021. Estimated that a ransomware attacks on business happen on every 11 seconds, right? And that set us to reimagine the way we wanted to protect our data, right? It's no longer just about backup. It's no longer just about data protection, right? So we are seeing the shift from cyber resilience, from cybersecurity into cyber resiliency. So as to be able to take a different posture, taking so-called the defense in depth posture, having a more fortified last line of defense, right? So I'm seeing a lot of hand raisings and questions coming in. If we are not able to address that, we'll come to that at the end of my presentations. Right. So make no mistake, the business is under attack, right? So we are all under attack. No matter how much of an infrastructure security you put across, trying to stop the kill chain or slow down the kill chain, right? So there's of course prevention, detections. When we talk about defense in depth, there's 3 key areas that we definitely get involved in the discussion. That is prevention, detections, and recovery, right? So from a infrastructure security standpoint, traditionally you always have all the security measure at your parameters, trying to prevent, right? Having a firewall, IAMs, and email security, right? Preventing the so-called the social engineering vulnerabilities at the front end, and there's of course there's XDR intrusion detections, in the domain of detections and trying to investigate further with the forensic intelligence, right, with your SIEM and SOAR tool. But unfortunately, right, the adversaries still able to execute across the kill chain, creep through into the environments and get to their crown jewel, which is data, right? So we are still seeing that happens, especially in 2021. There are some significant attacks that happen, right? Of course, some of them are quite, some of the familiar ones that most of you have seen in the news as well, like Colonia, Kasaya, that's the supply chain attack, supply chain vulnerabilities, right? Of course, in our region as well, in Singapore, banking sectors, that's not necessarily a ransomware, but we do see a numbers of cybersecurity attacks that's happening, right? And it's increasing. So how does that look like? Does it resonate with your environment in a way, right? No matter how much of a security measure you put in, right? So it's never about preventing that 999 attacks, but it's really about how you can minimize and bounce back from that single impact, right? So how are you going to survive that single impact, right? So the reality is that no matter how much of a perimeter security you put in, right? No matter how much of a prevention, intrusion detections measures they put in, there will be, you can't be absolutely sure that you're secure, right? So no matter how much of a security measure you put in, there'll always be a bad actors, human factors within your company, for example, right? So and their adversary trying to exploit any network vulnerabilities within your environment, trying to exploit bugs within your software, trying to exploit a third-party tool, right? Living off the land, exploiting an existing tool that you're using, supply chain attack. We have seen that from time to time. Right? So why are organizations stuck paying ransom, right? So when ransomware gets detonated, a very interesting statistics, it happens at the wee hours during the weekend. It caught you by off guard, by surprise. So once it gets detonated, a lot of times there's, of course, there's two options that organizations will take into considerations, whether it's to pay a ransom or you attempt to recover, right? So each of the options, of course, you have to take a series of factors into considerations, right? Including, forensic intelligence and trying to assess the magnitude of impact, right? The first thing that organization will start thinking of, do I have assured recoverabilities? How is your backup being protected from ransomware, right? A few questions to think about, right? How is it different from any applications that's sitting in your production environment that was, deployed on an operating systems with an existing file system that has been there for the past 30, 40 years, right? How does it look different as compared to any applications that's subjected to a ransomware attack, right? So assured recoverabilities is if your backup is being compromised, are you able to recover from any point in time? So you start engaging SecOps as well to perform investigations. Is your backup being safeguarded? Can anomalies be found, right? Just imagine if you have 2 petabytes in your environment, how do you understand the magnitude of impact? What are the sensitive data that's being impacted? What are the high value data that's being impacted? Is there risk of sensitive data being exfiltrated? Is malware presence, right? So the attempt to recover, are you reintroducing the malware into your environment again? How do you prevent an attack loop, right? Such that you are able to recover quickly, right? So it's the point in time having that malware or is free from that malware, threat hunting capabilities. So those are the things that we take into considerations and organizations have to take into considerations as part of the ransomware remediation process. So defense in depth with zero trust data security, that's of utmost important. We have seen that in the latest M2209 zero trust standard, which is adhered to the NIST, mandated by the Biden administration, right? So that's in the US federal public sector as well, right? So it's important for us to take a defense in that approach, not just taking a look at the infrastructure security, right? Being able to prevent, detect, investigate, conducting your forensic intelligence, that's important, but that has to be combined with data security, right? So that's our view and our visions on how we think about our product developments across all our product portfolio. Being able to deliver data resilience as part of the based data observability, right? And of course, data recovery, right? Giving you assured recoverabilities with speed to remediation, right? Getting IT ops and SecOps to be able to sit together, assess the magnitude of impact, and to be able to automate the entire recovery process. Right. So there's definitely many definitions, different standards to zero trust security, right? So Rubrik is adhered to the NIST standard, which we believe is the most open and comprehensive standard that is not being, that's vendor agnostic, of course, that's not being tied to any specific vendors and specific platforms, right? So that's something that we have delivered a paper recently, announcing that we are aligned to the not just the NIST, but of course the latest M2209 zero trust security standard. So taking a look at a little bit deeper how we deliver data security with these three key pillars, right? Which define our vision, the way we think about our product developments, right? And I mentioned across the entire product portfolio, it's not just about on-prem, but across the cloud, hybrid multi-cloud environments, how we protect data across IaaS, PaaS, as well as SaaS, right? So the genesis of data resilience, of course, is inbuilt into our product since day one, right? It's part of our DNA, right? So we built in with this data immutability, with our immutable architectures, right? So once we ingest the data, we actually ensure the immutability of the data. So how differently we are doing it as compared to all other solutions out there in the market, right? We do not expose any surface area for attack. I mentioned about the questions of how differently it is as compared to any other applications that's sitting in a production environment, right? So those applications, or if you look at a 5,000 feet, a lot of backup solution out there in the market today, still have the leverage on the existing file system that has been there for the past 30, 40 years, right? So how do you eliminate that surface area for attack? And then how do you deliver an immutable architecture such that once you ingest the data, you can have assured recoverabilities, right? So those are the key considerations in our data resilience architecture. In 2017, we have our first customer encountering a ransomware attack. And customer come to us and we are trying to recover, and we suggest to the customer, hey, just recover. We have assured recoverabilities. And we start to realize that it's not just about backups and recovery. And customer was telling us, hey, how do I assess the magnitude of impact? How do I know that which point in time is actually a clean copy, right? So we realized that there's an opportunity for us to really understand better as we ingest the data across the timeline. There's an opportunity for us to really understand from a historical view, right? What has been done and who does what changes and what anomalies has been detected and which point in time. So that's, data observability, right? So now you can discover sensitive data, identify ransomware attacks based on a machine learning AI model, right? So we further train with 100 petabytes of data to be able to perform the data observability to understand what kind of anomalies has been detected and how can we threat hunt, right? Which is built into as part of our data recovery capabilities, right? You can then threat hunt based on the indicator of compromise, building in Yara rule, right? Based on the binaries and based on keywords as well. So this is inbuilt into our whole suite of data security capabilities without any dependency on a third-party applications, right? So make no mistake, if you speak to a lot of solution providers in the market today, at a 5,000 feet, many of you, will get the same answer. Hey, we can deliver anomalies detection. You have additional capabilities and so on. But if you drill a little bit deeper, start to realize that there's dependency on a third party. And what does that mean? Right. So that means that there's actually a risk of supply chain vulnerabilities, right? So you have no control over third-party products. So there's a risk of a supply chain vulnerabilities. So we have taken all this into the deep considerations as we design our product, right? With the abilities to create analytical metadata, we can actually build in our native capability with these forensic intelligence capabilities. So with that, when you're attempting to recover, we can then put IT ops and SecOps together. There's cross-team collaborations between the IT ops and SecOps teams, right? We present a single pane of glass, right? As we know, IT ops and SecOps comes from different background, different skill set, different culture, and different tool set, right? So that aims to be able to streamline the entire recovery process, right? So with that, backups is safeguarded. We have an immutable architectures, and you can actually detect the anomalies and understand what are the high value data that's being impacted, right, as part of that detections, and then perform threat hunting, right? So threat hunting is more on a reactive threat hunt as part of the recovery process. And of course, you can threat hunt as part of your response, right? And then to find out if there's any, that particular point in time is clean from any malware, if there's any abnormal PowerShell script, right? Or any Python script that contains certain anomalies that creates a backdoor to connect to the C2, right? So those are the capabilities that we have built in to be able to perform threat hunts and then accelerate the applications recovery, right? So when we talk about applications recovery, that gives us the ability to set dependencies between apps, webs, and databases so as to be able to orchestrate the entire recovery process. So just to run through a quick use case that a large regional airline in Asia, in our region, right? So the original solutions that the customers was using was actually a 3-tier architectures, a traditional 3-tier backups recovery solutions. That's without any air gaps. It's leveraging on an existing file system that has been there for the last 30, 40 years, right? So there's a highly complex architectures that was in place. And then we replace it with the hyperconvergence scale architectures, right? Putting all these different components, complexity into a single software fabric where we can then put it into a scale architectures. And it's a logical air gap, right? So we do not expose any file system over a standard storage protocol, right? It's a scale out simplicity with zero trust data security. There's no storage that's being presented online. That's the key difference as compared to any traditional backup solution out there in the market, right? The most important thing, you are able to manage the entire data lifecycle and with end-to-end security, end-to-end encryptions, right? So integrate with AWS S3, immutable object lock for long-term retention lifecycle management, right? So with that, they actually achieve a 80% productivity improvement, achieving a remote bolting, right? Eliminating any manual tape transportation, right? Remote bolting with archival into a AWS immutable object storage, reducing business downtime with instant live mounting, and of course, a faster data protection for private cloud environment, right? So that is part of the solutions. And of course, with that, we further secure the environment and the administrative access with a multi-factor authentications with a time-based one-time password, right? So there's also a additional security features that's being built into Rubrik cloud data management cluster that is also known as a monotonic lock, right? To prevent any NTP poisoning, right? So we can of course further discuss into how we ensure the further to prevent any compromise at the administrative layer, right? And of course, there's more flexible architectural option. I won't go too much detail into this, but you know, it's highly flexible if you are looking at logical air gap, bidirectional logical air gap, or combining logical air gap with instant cloud tiering. And last but not least, there's one very favorite architectural options that came out recently to adhere to any compliance policy, right? That is physical air gap, right? So that's meant for lesser than 5% of the global customers out there in the market. It could be, you know, it could be large banking environment. It could be a public sector agency, right? So how uniquely we are doing it as compared to all other solutions in the market is that we actually do a pool replication that allow us to create a physical air gap, right? So the vault logic will periodically randomly open so-called a firewall to pull the replic data over from source to target as part of the replication process. So that is really different from all other solutions out there in the market where it's doing a push replication, right? Which actually expose the target with a surface area for attack. Okay. So yeah, with that, I will be ending my presentation with the Rubrik Security Cloud, which was actually presented in the latest Forward event, right? So this is the setting the 3 key pillars on how we think about solution portfolio with data resilience, data observability, and data recovery capabilities, right? With a zero trust data security capabilities. And we also introduced a Rubrik Data Security Command Center as part of the launch, right? Helping customers to understand their data security posture as we ingest the data, not only that we allow customers to leverage on the data that we ingested for strategic use case, tactical and strategic use cases, but to be leveraged on those data for forensic intelligence. And it's not secondary data. It's a primary data that we ingested for protection, and you can actually leverage on the data for further forensic intelligence. So with that, we are also the only company that provides a 5 million ransomware recovery warranty, right? So we are the only one in the markets with this confidence, delivering the ransomware recovery warranty. Just feel free to speak to our sales representative within your region itself. Happy to go into further discussions. Right. With that, I've ended my presentations. Let's take a look if there's any questions on